It is 7 a.m., August 28th, 2019. I'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
First absent, Thompson.
Here.
Arneson,
Here.
Absent,
Here.
Hicks,
Yeah.
Fish,
Here.
Lindbergh,
Here.
Here.
We have a quorum. We have one additional item on the agenda, and we're going to actually put that first because of timing reasons. So you have a sheet on your desk, an update on from the Aquatics Committee, and I'll call on Bridget Leonard to get us started this morning. Good morning, Bridget.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, council members. Nice to be with you this morning. The last time I was here, the council and the city requested from the council that we were able to reach out to U.S. Aquatics and request a bid or a proposal from them. So since then, we have been in contact with U.S. Aquatics. They did submit a proposal to us. It is phased from preliminary design through construction. And they laid it out so that the council can vote yea or nay on the different phases. So it's phased out. So their fee for this service is 7% of the total construction costs of $4,750,000. And this preliminary design phase, which we're requesting that you approve today, is 1% of those construction costs. So $47,500 for their preliminary design work. So that's our first request today, is approving that proposal and having us move forward with them designing and laying out for us the park and all the amenities with it. And then the second request we have today is for city staff to begin discussions with the owner of the land east of the Kirkbride. There's about 11 plus acres that is a potential site for the aquatics park.
Thanks, Bridget. So some questions, I'm sure. I have a couple, first for staff. So the 7% of the total construction, is that in line with what we see on other projects? Brian, Andrew, is that?
Defer to you, Brian.
That's
Yeah.
that's the one,
Based on
okay.
construction, yep.
Okay, thanks. And then, Bridget, you said that it's 1% of the total construction, and that's the base bid, is that correct? That the 4 million you mentioned, explain that, how does that work?
So anyone can help me, but the construction cost is different than the total project cost.
Okay.
So that, so construction is to build, to, all
I
the
see. Got it.
stuff.
Actual
And then the rest is
costs.
like
Yeah.
fees and
Got it, okay.
and analysts and that kind of stuff.
And then one final
Amenities.
question from me for, and this maybe to Bridget, maybe to staff. So the specific site that you're talking about, the negotiations, does this next phase, does phase one lock us into that site before we've negotiated on it, or that's just basic work that needs to be done to go forward?
Yeah, I think that those, they'll have to parallel each other and kind of work with city staff and discussing which site and then, design, and those will kind of work in tandem.
Okay.
So no, it wouldn't lock you in.
Okay. Brian?
In their proposal, I briefly went through it. It outlined two sites, Kirkbride Park and the other one being, I'm drawing.
Adams
Park.
Grotto.
Adams Park as the two sites of analysis. So it listed those two as as conditions in their preliminary design agreement.
Okay.
So, no, I think accepting the 47,000 and everything is just for the preliminary design. Other council approval would have to be required if, moving steps forward to design development and construction contracts.
To a
actually.
specific.
So I believe what you're acting on is just preliminary design, which I think in the packet it shows there what the deliverables are in regards to that preliminary design. And identified those two
Got it.
sites for review, additional review.
Thanks, Brian. Other questions, comments?
If you want,
Anthony,
I got a few. As well, hopefully as expected. But I think one of the questions I had was that obviously they define plus expenses in the general project, and I wondered if that's we could get an estimate on how much that's going to be, or something written in there that's a not to exceed. Because obviously expenses can run rampant. On the kind of the site, obviously, there's 2 sites listed. I think the East Kirkbride, I think we need to talk to SHPO and Friends of the Kirkbride before really doing a lot of work on that. I know the city administrator said that SHPO didn't totally rule out building there, but before we do a lot of work and spend a lot of money, we might as well get the answer to that. And on Adams, I think somebody should talk to Ms. Adams before going down the road on that, because before was another council member suggested doing something at Adams Park, and Virginia wasn't too enamored with doing something. So I think out of courtesy, we should speak to her. Yeah, technically it belongs to the city, but she's a good supporter of the city. I think under F1, they sort of said establishing content for the November referendum. They probably need to know that that needs to be brought forward to sort of the end of this year, January, because we have to go to the legislator. Let's see, I mentioned not to exceed. They kind of, what concerned me about the travel expenses is they mention it like 3 or 4 times in this proposal that travel expenses are not included. Obviously, any specialty testing they're not going to do, so that would be an additional cost. I was curious what they meant under construction documents, speciality, other site facility background information that the city may be able to provide. I wasn't quite sure what they really meant by that. The other things that is a general, I think, one of the things that I would like to see is that an update on the ongoing operational costs in this kind of study or phase, because I think that's important for the voters to know what the long-term effect is going to be on the tax levy. The other kind of general comments I had was that, and maybe Bill can answer this, is how much are we kind of into this project so far, and how are we going to fund this? And we also asked, when we wanted to do some work at the Kirkbride, we asked the Friends of the Kirkbride for some financial assistance and support. I don't think that this phase is much different. At some point, when are we going to see, the library? There was Friends of the Library that put money into helping fund some of those things. Are we going to see some funding from private sources to help this? Because obviously this is all going to be taxpayer dollars. I think that's everything I have.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. Just to respond, Bill, you can respond. The first couple, maybe would it be possible that we could reach out to US Aquatics and get that answer on the travel, see if there's a not to exceed on the travel? Just see if they have a number in mind.
I mean, we ask for that. All the time. It's not unrealistic.
We can do that by, you can at least get a response by Monday when we vote on this at the council. And then SHPO and the Friends, I think, or not the Friends, but SHPO, we can certainly reach out to them on this proposed land. That shouldn't be a difficult one. And then you mentioned Virginia Adams. That shouldn't be a problem. I'm happy to reach out.
No, I just think, and
Not to be a problem, not to be a problem to get a hold of her and talk to her about that as well, so. And then, Bill, did you have a response to the other?
Sure. So
Question.
as far as how far we're into it, two parts to that question. One, we had $20,000 left over of donations that we had carried in our fund balance that we used for the feasibility study. I think we started by using, Bridget, correct me if I'm wrong, but 15,000 towards that update. And then we went on to do the fundraising feasibility, right? Where we used the balance, so that other like 5,000. And then I think that was somewhat higher than that. So we have some funds sitting in the project costs that we are carrying right now. I don't know if it's 10,000 at the most. Does that sound reasonable?
Does.
So then, as far as how we would fund this then going forward, since we used up those donations, it would go into that project account, and we would carry that as a city until the project would be financed. So we would accumulate costs, basically internally finance them in the capital project fund, and then when and if this project comes to fruition and you issue bonds for it, those costs would be reimbursed through the financing.
And just to be clear, that's, we've done that with other
We've
projects.
done that on
with-
most every project.
Most every project,
So
correct.
that's standard practice for us.
Okay. Okay, so we can get hopefully some answers to those questions by Monday night when we make a final vote on this, or at least reach out and make efforts to get those questions answered.
Your Honor, Councilmember Hicks, I don't believe this particular site is part of the campus designation for the historic campus at the Kirkbride. So in terms of engaging the State Historic Preservation Office, that's probably not necessary. But I think point well taken on Friends of the Kirkbride, who have put a lot of time and energy and effort into the campus as a whole, and who have worked closely with Campus Development Group. And I think those would be appropriate conversations to engage. But I'm fairly certain that this is beyond the scope of the historic district, because there are pieces of this property that have previously been platted, and there's going to be single-family homes developed on the property that certainly wouldn't meet the historic standards related to the campus.
It probably wouldn't hurt to just make,
Courtesy call.
Yep.
just so we don't have a last-minute surprise. Yeah, Jim?
The piece of land they're talking about, isn't that the piece that's over by the vet's home?
Yeah.
Correct.
Long Park Street, I think it is?
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
Any other questions? Scott?
The first versions of these reports that we saw indicated that there were quite a few more than 2 sites even on the list. You know, there were at least a dozen, it seems to me. And I'm not exactly clear on how we ended up with just these 2 to choose from. I know there were several suggestions, and the East Kirkbride one was kind of the preferred one of the committee when the last presentation was made. But I didn't get the impression that as a whole we had decided that that's the one we want. It could easily have been this Adams one or any other one on that list for that matter. If we go ahead with this proposal, it seems like we've limited our options to just the 2 they've suggested here, and I don't think that we'd want to do that.
I think the site selection was part of the work of the initial aquatics. It was part of the charge that we gave to the initial, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Councilmember Kwame, council members, you are absolutely right. There were 12 sites that were reviewed, and U.S. Aquatics did a site analysis algorithm with about 15 different categories, such as topography and ease of acquisition, size, different things like that, you know, where it is in the town, ease of accessibility. And so that was back in 2017. And the one that rose to the top was the Kirkbride campus. And that's the one that was approved by the council to move forward on. And then there was some SHPO concerns that would have really delayed this if it even would have been acceptable by SHPO. So it was back to the drawing board. We did include even another couple sites to kind of review. These are the 2 that maintained being at the top. You know, they were still kind of those top ones. Honestly, We've done a pretty thorough assessment of all the spaces. Really size, you need about 6 acres, is really the one that cuts out a lot of potential parks or city-owned property in town. And so at this point, the committee, the city, and U.S. Aquatics feels like these two have the highest potential to be successful. With East Kirkbride, given that it's flat and the space it offers is really quite ideal, according to the consultant.
Any other questions, comments? Jim?
I will offer the motion that we go ahead and bring this to the council Monday night.
Council for discussion Monday night. Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Brent. Any further comments? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No.
That motion carries. Thank you, Bridget. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda this morning is a discussion on snow removal, unfortunately. Good morning, Guy.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, it's coming. It does go beyond that a little bit, too. Hopefully, if we can implement this parking restriction ordinance, it would help us out with other maintenance activities as well. But the request this morning is to restrict downtown parking. So downtown is going to be defined as from Union to Cascade on Lincoln, from Cavour to Washington on Court, Mill, and Cascade. So that downtown
Say it
area,
again, Guy, Union to
Union to Cascade on Lincoln,
On Lincoln, yep.
Cavour to Washington on Court, Mill, and Cascade.
It's a 2-block area basically around Union.
Yeah. So the request is to restrict, not allow on-street parking during the hours of 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. That would just allow for ease of snow removal for one, street sweeping, and then also striping activities when we go the route of marking individual parking stalls on Lincoln. This is an ordinance that's similar to what a lot of cities around the state have on their books already. So some of the rationale is, the ease of snow removal and then the cost. Right now, as it is, we have to sign this whole area for no parking for snow removal, and that's about a 3 to 4 hour operation just to put the signs out and then to pick them up. So there would be some savings in labor and equipment in that. As far as what are the people going to do if they can't park on the street, you can see the map that's on the screens. We've got 10 city lots. Each lot has available rentable spaces. And right now they are really underutilized. There's one lot that's full to capacity, and that's the upper deck of parking ramp, which is leased fully to American Federal. The other lot that's utilized to its greatest percentage of rented spaces is our probably least desirable lot at the corner of Court and Cavour, the gravel lot by Pickett's. The rest of them, I gave you all a sheet of what's rented and what's available to rent. It just shows how underutilized our rentable spaces are. There are a few lots that they probably don't have enough space designated as rentable to accommodate moving everybody off the street. One in particular is the River Inn. That's got 38 units in that building, and the nearest lot is directly across from City Hall here, south of Kreckelberg's office, and that's designated right now to only have 10 rentable spots in it. So we may need to look at increasing that number. But otherwise, all of the other apartment buildings in this downtown area have parking that's available to them within a relative short distance. That's the request. Implement an ordinance to restrict parking 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. year-round.
And this is year-round, yep. Any, I have a question, Guy. So that, the River Inn, there are a lot of cars that I would assume park out on the street.
Yes.
For there, and they don't have a readily available lot just in the back of the spot. So it's Kreckelberg. So there's 30 spaces there. 10 of them are rentable. 7 are rented. What would be the solution? I mean, did they use those other 20 spaces during the day, presumably?
Yeah, that's how it was set up years ago. Each parking lot, the council had designated certain number of spaces as rentable, and then the rest were presumably for daytime parking for downtown business customers.
Sure.
But, so yeah, increasing the number of rentable spaces in that lot, and then potentially below the parking ramp in the lower level, and then to the east in the alleyway parking lot just west of Cascade.
Any questions, thoughts from the council? Anthony?
You know, I mean, obviously this would be quite a change for kind of the area. So, do we have a plan on how we're going to inform citizens, and then are we actually going to enforce it? I mean, if we do it, then are we going to ticket people if they, you know, I mean, after a reasonable period of time for education, then are we going to ticket people or tow people?
Yeah, good question. I had the same question. And then the other question I had is, do most communities, do they do this year round? I know, are there many that do it, you know, November 1st or
It's a mixed bag. Yeah, there's both. Some do it year round, but yeah, there's quite a few that just restrict it for the winter months.
how often do we, you know, you mentioned sweeping and striping. How often do we sweep and stripe?
The striping would be once annually.
Once a year.
The sweeping probably every other week.
Okay.
And as far as education, we would, if you guys ask the city or attorney to draft the ordinance, we implement it, we would likely put the word out with the rental registration notices that will go out October 1st. And along with that, we'd, you know, do website, Facebook, whatever means we can to get the word out.
Another question, guys. So when you sweep every other week, but you don't have to move cars for that, I assume you just sweep around those cars, which is different than plowing, correct?
Right, yeah, they are swept around, but if we
So-
could just go right down without having to go around, it would just be a
Certainly.
more thorough.
But I can see the argument on the other side saying that, you know, the 2 months out of the year that we don't have snow, no, it's 8 months that we don't have snow. You know, there's probably a lot of just, you know, empty parking spots that would be pretty convenient for the people who live down there to have. So I could see just doing a winter, I mean, because that's what costs us the money and the time
Right.
is to,
Yep.
because we have to move that snow and we don't have to sweep necessarily, you know, in an emergency situation, obviously. So, I mean, I could see a snow removal working as well. I mean, just during the winter months, but that's just my thoughts. So,
Jim has a question.
Jim?
I think if you're going to do it, you should do it year-round, so people get used to it. Otherwise, you come fall, and you're going to go through the same thing year after year after year. If they're used to having to be off the street, I think that works better than having, well, what month is it? Do I have to be off the street or not? I mean, just make it a law or an ordinance, and that's it. It's full-time.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Any other thoughts? That's what's recommended here. So that's what we'll be moving to the council.
I think
someone would like to offer.
I think maybe we can do that, but on Monday night, could we also get a physical map just showing exactly which streets, you know, where we propose it? And I would make the recommendation it goes to council on Monday night.
There's a recommendation. Someone would like to second that?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Krista. Any other comments, questions? All in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Right.
Opposed, same sign.
I think
Someone had
Scott had a question, I think.
Oh, did I miss you, Scott? I'm sorry.
Regarding whether we should do it seasonally or not, I guess. I mean, there are plenty of places that have snow emergency route plans and things that are just winter only, and people get used to that. And yet, I think in this case, it's been shown that we've got enough space so that it's not going to be a hardship for people in the summertime. And so I would support it. as
Thanks, Scott.
presented.
All right, we'll bring that to the council on Monday night. Thank you, Guy. The next item on the agenda is a 2020 fee schedule, and we'll call on our Finance Director, Bill Sonderman. Morning, Bill.
Good morning. Thank you, Your Honor. Council, in your packet, you have the fee schedule and indicated in red those proposed changes. There's not much for changes this year. At this time, we may come back a little later this fall. We'll see where things go. But on your first page, removing the one clause about the nuisance fee and just rolling that in down with the clause right below it. So it's dealing with City Code Section 6.22 and 6.23. And it states there that on a third request or subsequent violation, this becomes a misdemeanor. Now, in our code, it says we may do that after the second, and that's why we had that in at the first one. But our practice is to wait till the third violation to make that a misdemeanor, so that's why we just rolling that in based on practice, and the code does say may and not shall. Let's see, flipping forward. Okay, on page 4, under planning and zoning, the natural landscape permit, looking at taking that out. It's really not being used, and the Natural Resources Committee is recommending that we just get rid of that. Their concern is that a barrier to people putting in these natural plantings? So we'll deal with that if we start getting more, if we start seeing a cost to that. Anything to add on that, Andrew?
The only thing I want to say is the permit will still exist. We're just we're proposing to remove the fees at this time to see if that is truly the barrier to these startups. Because since we've implemented the fee, we've had 0 parties come forward to get that permit.
Okay, so removing that. Going up to page 7. On the water meter valves, those prices do change. They could change during the year because you can see that clauses will change that as prices increase. But we are adding that multi-pipe adapter for $19.17. We do need that charge in there. That is a piece to this. Going to page 8, just want to point out about rental housing registration. We are not making any recommendations to the fees at this time because you as a council still need to see where we're going to go with that and discuss that. So if we make changes there, then we may make changes to the fee schedule. But of course, we don't want to do that in advance of that and make some assumptions. So that is staying the same. And then go up to page 12. The kids camp, moving that fee from $130 to $150. That's per 2-week session. Now, we are seeing increased costs to this program as far as the bus trips and whatnot that go with that. And we also have a waiting list for this program. So very popular program, but our costs are going up. We haven't increased it since 2016, I believe, and some of our bus trip costs are up $27 since 2016. So it is an increase that is needed on that one. And then on the last page, page 13, adding a forfeiture fee. So when the police department is working through the process with forfeitures, right now we only get reimbursed for city expenses if there's enough money from the sale for that, and if there's not a lien, so to speak, on that vehicle, because you have to make sure that lien gets paid off or some money goes towards that. Statute does outline, certain funds go to the state and the attorney's office and then some to the police department, but this would ensure that at least we'd cover our administration work in dealing with these forfeitures. I did review this with the city attorney yesterday to make sure we have statutory authority to do that, and we do. He doesn't see any problem with that, adding a forfeiture fee on top of, selling that forfeiture and getting proceeds back that way. So that would be a new fee there. So that's what we have for changes this year.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions? Comments?
I got a comment. I think you could move color copy and printing up to $2 because that's what we just agreed to pay U.S. Aquatics as opposed to 50 cents.
So we're a pretty good deal there, aren't we?
Yep. So the answer is we should do the copying in-house.
Thanks. Any other questions?
With that, I would make
comments?
the proposal that
Move that to the
Yep.
council on Monday. Thank you, Anthony.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Caroline. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Next item is ordinance 91, updating our tobacco ordinance to match the county. I'll call on Andrew Bremseth.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Members, last year, Otter Tail County passed a countywide ordinance that restricted the sale of tobacco to individuals under the age of 21. That ordinance supersedes ours, and ours is no longer consistent because our state's 18 years of age. So simply wanting to go through, clean that up, update the language of that ordinance to make it consistent with the ruling ordinance, what should be Otter Tail County. So it's pretty straightforward. It's striking out the references to the age of 18 and adding in references to the age of 21 and updating the relevant state statutes associated with tobacco laws today. So the recommendation for the council is to direct the city attorney to draft this amended ordinance, which obviously it's before you today, so that will be pretty easy, and then to hold the first reading on Tuesday night at the council meeting.
Someone like to make that motion?
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second.
Thanks, Krista. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next item is an airport agreement. I'll call on our city engineer, Brian Yubaro. Morning, Brian.
Say good morning, Your Honor, and members of the council here. Before you, as in regards to the Fergus Falls Municipal Airport Maintenance and Operation Agreement, in addition to what we get from the state of Minnesota and federal shares for our capital improvement projects, we also get maintenance and operation funds from the state. This is referred to airport maintenance and operations. It's a grant contract. We get this on an every 2-year basis. I've attached the agreement for you to review. This offering is a 75% reimbursement rate with a total not to exceed of $71,453 per year. This is used for heating, electrical, parts, supplies, employee wages as an eligible item. By taking this, we have to meet certain airports' operational standards to be approved for these funds. Excuse me. So I've provided an informational note from dating back from state fiscal year 2014, 2015 with the rates and annual amounts under this contract. This approximately supplements 32% of our annual operating budget. So in order to accept these funds from state of Minnesota, they require a resolution be passed, thereby accepting these funds from the state of Minnesota. So I'm requesting accepting the state fiscal years 2020, 2021 for these airport operation and maintenance agreements.
Thank you, Brian.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Brent. Any questions or comments of Brian? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
We're going to bring item number 5, the Public Improvement 9346 Tax Lane Relocation Project. We're going to bring that straight to the council Monday night, so we're going to go to the next one, which is Public Improvement 5329, 210 Improvement Project. Trunk Highway 210, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you again. In 2020, MnDOT is proposing to reconstruct Trunk Highway 210. The vicinity of this is 210, starting west of Redwood Lane and extending approximately 5.3 miles to the west. Over a year ago, MnDOT District 4 representatives have contacted the city and local abutting properties. That reach out was in regards to interim access during construction and also some airport runway protection zone issues because they're primarily requesting to install a snow fence off of one of our runways, RPZ zones. We're still looking, we're just trying to resolve those and everything. Just recently in July, they sent us the first copy of the draft plan set, and we noticed a few things, and most glaringly was some potential utility impacts. We sent our comments back to MnDOT. They've acknowledged them, but they're still requesting that we make provisions on the city's behalf for this type of work. I have a map on there, Lynn, if you could please turn that up. In PDF. This map right here shows the approximate location of the utility impacts. It's Trunk Highway 210 extending westerly, easterly. Two Rivers Road bounded on the west side, and County Road 116 for general location. During our review, the MnDOT's proposing to do some significant excavation and ditching on the north side of Trunk Highway 210. They claim this ditching is needed for additional snow storage, therefore for safety purposes. I think everybody knows that 210 does pose some challenges during the winter months, so they're attempting to implement doing some snow fence with a combination of some of this ditching. However, the city, in the same vicinity of this ditching, where they're proposing not only widening up to 10 feet, also increasing the depth downward up to 5 feet. We own and operate a 10-inch water main and a 6-inch sanitary force main. These were both constructed in 1997. We had to obtain a permit from MnDOT to occupy within their right-of-way, but these two utilities, we're looking at about 1,500 lineal feet apiece. So we've had these discussions in regards to our utilities. Like I mentioned, in 1997, I have also included excerpt from the permit and the provisions in regards to some of the conditions that the owner of the city and MnDOT, what their agreement is in regards to these utilities. That being said, whatever determination of the impacts is, it's at the city's sole expense to address them, to protect ours, but for MnDOT to facilitate their project. I want to note a representative. There's a lot of moving components with this project. MnDOT is going to be sending down a representative to talk about this project as a whole, to answer any of these questions that we want to discuss. But in order to really fully understand the impacts, I requested a professional services proposal from Interstate to look at these particular utilities shown on here. We're not sure, based on the impacts, what the proper measure is. It could be utility relocation, or perhaps insulating is another industry standard. However, we don't quite know the full impacts yet of what that's going to consist of, other than there will be impacts. So at this time, I'm requesting initiate Public Improvement 5329, the Trunk Highway 210 Reconstruction Project Review, and also accept Interstate Engineering's professional services agreement in the amount of $7,500 for this preliminary utility review.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions of our city engineer? If not, is somebody like to make the motion?
I've got a question to make the motion. Have you talked to Great Plains Natural Gas? Have they got the same issue?
We haven't spoken to them. MnDOT did send out, these preliminary plans was sent to all public and private utility companies. I'm assuming they may be impacted. Just reviewing, I don't have access to where their mains are, but I'm assuming just based on the right-of-way, if you look to the south, that's the railroad right-of-way, it's pretty limited. So I'm assuming there's a much more, other than public utilities, other utilities located on the north side in the same vicinity. That would be, I would have to venture, much more impacted than us.
I know it's going to be significant. They're going to divert traffic and everything. It's going to take a long time too. So it's going to be quite inconvenient for the residents of Two Rivers.
Yes.
Quite so. With that,
Those are things we're working on and everything. I did accept an agreement with them to do a cooperative agreement they're going to, with some of the returns like Two River Roads, to resurface that as well as in conjunction with this. It just made sense at a low cost to do that and everything. But access, yes, access is a concern, and that's something too as well that we'll be talking about.
Thanks, Brian. So we have a motion. Someone like to make a second to that? Second, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
There are no other additional agenda items that I'm aware of, unless anyone has anything. Just a couple announcements. Monday, September 2nd, of course, is Labor Day. Hope everyone has a happy Labor Day. Tuesday, September 3rd, will be the regular council meeting. 5:30 here in the City Council chambers, Tuesday, September 3rd. Any garbage and recycling normally picked up on Monday, September 2nd, will be moved to Tuesday, September 3rd, and Tuesday will be moved to Wednesday, September 4th. And with that, unless there's anything else to come before the council, we're adjourned.